Hello, this is Jen Rubin of the Washington Post. I'm here to tell you about my new podcast, Jen Rubin's Green Room. We're going to have a series of fun guests. We're going to chew the fat and we're going to dish the dirt. And we're going to bring you the best and the smartest people I can find. Make sure you tell your friends. Join us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is master political strategist Paul Begala. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, and don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the links to our sponsors in our recent episodes' show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It really helps make this podcast happen. Tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. James, I did not expect to say the following sentence. On the default debt ceiling measure, Joe Biden was a really good negotiator, and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was a responsible leader. Now, it was reckless to use the debt ceiling, which covers previously incurred obligations and does risk the full faith and credit of the United States, as blackmail, which is what House Republicans did. But that final deal, which after one or two more fits and starts, I expect to clear Congress by the middle of next week, carries an important recommendation. It doesn't do much harm. And the Democratic negotiators, Yolanda Young, the OMB director, earlier 14 years in the House Appropriations Committee, where she won bipartisan respect, and Biden confidant Steve Ricchetti and their chief legislative director all knew their stuff, and they played their cards well. And likewise, McCarthy's delegates, Congressman Graves and McHenry, both bona fide conservatives who didn't want to blow up the place and the U.S. economy. So they ended up, I think, given the circumstances we're in now, particularly with that crazy House Republican conference, they ended up with a pretty good deal. There are a couple bad provisions. The work requirements for people on welfare and food stamps we've seen before in states like Arkansas, they really don't work. But that could have been worse. Biden wisely refused to allow that requirement for Medicaid. So it was a bad precedent, but it ended up better, certainly, than I expected.
Well, I agree. I mean, I actually was pretty down about it. And the big thing is we didn't default on the debt. That would have been catastrophic. And I tell you, you got to give a lot of credit to East Baton Rouge Parish here. Garrett Graves, Baton Rougean, as is the OMB director, who's from Zachary, same place that Doug Williams from, and pair her with the UN ambassador, Ms. Greenfield, who's from Baker. It's actually the same part of the world. So this is a good trick for
two prominent
Louisiana.
black women.
Two prominent black women, yes, that are both in the. Well, I guess the OMB director is not in the cabinet. I'm not sure. Maybe they are now. Who knows what's in the cabinet? But
well, she's certainly in the cabinet rank. Whether
right?
She's
yeah. But a really talented person. It pointed out to me this morning. 14 years on the Appropriation Committee. They all know each other. She knew. It pays to put somebody in a place that knows something. That everybody's looking for, the right kind of mix and everything else. When you're the OMB director and you're negotiating and you got to know something. And I think Garrett, his dad was a very respected businessman. He was an engineer in Baton Rouge. My brother's a contractor, knew him well. And I don't think that he was very intent on blowing up the entire U.S. economy. So, there's some good political back and forth, but so far it looks like it was a decent deal all the way around.
Yeah, there's things we don't know. There's some money floating around. We're not sure where it's going to go, but that's always the case in a big deal like this. I think you're absolutely right about Graves and Young. And also, Steve Ricchetti has been a lobbyist and worked with Biden for years. He knew what was going on. The head of their legislative division did. And Patrick McHenry from North Carolina is like Graves, a conservative, but they're conservatives of yesteryear almost. I mean, they want to get conservative things done. They want to stop liberal things from getting done. They don't want to explode. They don't want to destroy and tear down.
Right. And it pains me to say this, but you got to give McCarthy some credit here.
Absolutely. He appointed them.
Yeah. And let's see what happens. It wasn't America's finest hour, but we got through it. And that's the big thing.
Hey, James, one more thing. Most Democrats, I hope, will vote for this for a couple reasons. It's the world they live in now. The Republicans won control of the House. Wish they hadn't, but they did. And you had to come up with some kind of a compromise. This is what would have, I think, ultimately something close to this occurred on the budget. But also, the more they carp and complain and say, God, it was awful, it was terrible, the more they just accelerate that mediocre enthusiasm from some Democratic voters. To vote against this is almost an irresponsible vote because the option is default.
You hit on what, to me, for a political person, is the critical thing when you talk about mediocre enthusiasm. I mean, the president's numbers among blacks are tepid. They're like 60%. All right. And among young people, they're downright frigid. It's like 32%. Among Democrats, they're not great. It's like 74%. Trump was always like 90% among Republicans. And of course, what's going to happen is the predictable number of people will come out and say, this hurts us, it was a bad deal, we can't be for this. And casual people, can't say that I blame them, say, well, if the Democrats don't think this is very good for why should I think it's good?
Yep.
And that just contributes. And the biggest political problem right now that the Democrats have, the Republicans will be against it no matter what. The independents can, they broke for us in 2022 for, not very complicated reasons. But this is politically, I'm afraid that not only the president not get very much credit for them, if anything, it could hurt him slightly.
And I can hear the rejoinder from some of the left now. Well, so you're asking me to vote for a measure that I don't like. Yeah, I'm going to ask you to vote for a measure that's far from perfect, but look at what the alternative is. And if you can't run around and saying, boy, we could have gotten a better deal. You got the best deal you could possibly get given the circumstances.
Yeah, but then you got the digital director saying, if you vote against this, we think we can raise another $1.2 million on. I mean, the money and the overnights and the visibility and the instant reaction, you can't run a government like that. Right. And that's the way this government is being run by, Marjorie Taylor Greene's overnight digital fundraising or some, Cori Bush's overnight digital fundraising. It's a bad way to do business, but it's where we are now.
Well, that's why Ron DeSantis came out strongly against this thing. He's going to raise money from it. He's going to try to pressure Trump.
Absolutely.
And he figures he doesn't lose anything with the base. He doesn't give a damn about what the hell it does to the economy, but he immediately came out against it.
I'll clean up. Marjorie Taylor Greene is like a stupid, I think in some ways, evil person. I think Cori Bush is naive. I don't mean to equate the two, but make that case.
I agree. Well, okay. So James, a little bit more good news about the administration than we've been saying for the last couple of weeks. You may well be right. Biden may not get any credit, could even get hurt a little bit, but he does deserve some credit on this. And I think if Democrats are smart, it's not going to be a game changer by any means, but I think, at least no harm was done.
Yeah. The average guy, it's just hard to say, well, they kept the government from defaulting. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. He should. All right. In any world, he should be. He was skillful. He appointed the right people. The case he makes is that he's wise and experienced, and this was certainly evidence of that. But I don't think people are going to give him very much credit for this because they assume that's what you're supposed to do. But we'll see.
Yeah. No, that's right. Okay, James, our guest is the maestro of politics, Paul Begala, the pride and joy of Fort Bend County and the Texas Longhorns. You know, Paul, I remember not that long ago talking to you about a changing Texas. Paul, they are nuttier than ever. I mean, culminating this week with the impeachment by the Republican State House of Attorney General Ken Paxton under state indictment for years and under a federal investigation for bribery charges brought by his own staff. This looks like a third world place.
It really is astonishing. First, thanks for having me back on. Love the podcast. It's just my favorite. This is amazing. That, Republicans, it's been a one-party state. Democrats haven't won a single statewide election in 28 years. Not one. And we elect everybody statewide in Texas, the ag commissioner and the railroad commissioner. Nothing. But you're seeing one-party rule turn on itself. The attorney general has been accused of serious wrongdoing many times now. He's been under indictment for years. And that's still unresolved. The Justice Department is grinding slowly along on that. And maybe he's perfectly innocent. I don't know. But he did have, then after that, this is an indictment. The first indictment was for fraud. He is alleged to have defrauded he was then a member of the legislature. He's alleged to have defrauded a fellow member of the legislature on an investment deal. Under indictment for that. He's fighting that. Meanwhile, he becomes attorney general, gets elected. His top 8 aides, all political appointees, all Trumpy, Ken Paxton is his name, and Ken is the most Trumpy attorney general in America. More pro-Trump than Trump's attorney general, William Barr. And yet his top 8 aides, all Trumpy Republicans, resign en masse and accuse him of really terrible criminal wrongdoing, which has led to this impeachment. Here's why. They also alleged that they were punished as whistleblowers. So under the whistleblower statute, they sued Paxton, these dissident employees. Paxton settled with them for $3.3 million. And then he turned to the legislature and said, taxpayers of Texas should pay this $3.3 million. So the Speaker of the House and the members of the legislature said, look, you want the check, we have to investigate this. If you want $3.3 million of taxpayer money.
So he brought it on.
He brought it on himself through his own stupidity or avarice or whatever by trying to make the taxpayers pay for his alleged wrongdoing, for his legal settlement.
Paul, voters knew how shady Paxton has been. It's been out there, as you say, for a long time.
Yeah.
He brought that crazy lawsuit trying to overturn the presidential election in other states, right. Wisconsin and Georgia.
In Pennsylvania, right.
Right. And yet he easily beat a supposedly competitive primary challenger, George P. Bush, and walks away in the general. I mean, this is shades of Pa Ferguson. To reach back in my Texas history.
Yeah. This is probably politically his best defense, is that people knew about this and they voted for me anyway. Yeah. That's not a legal defense. The problem with that is in the impeachment, the House of Representatives alleges that part of this settlement, part of his activities had been to suppress the information about these allegations, to keep it from the voters. That's what the House is alleging. And I will note that the Republicans dominate the House. They voted to impeach him 121 to 23. All 8 members of his home county delegation, all Republicans from Collin County, which is has been one of the Republican strongholds in that state, all 8 of them in the House voted to impeach him. So this is really an overwhelming House vote, overwhelming rejection, overwhelming indictment. Now it goes to the Senate, where his home county senator is his wife, Angela.
Well, I want to get into that because I am going through some withdrawals with the end of the HBO series Succession, modeled after the cutthroating Murdochs. But I can see a sequel down there in Austin where the Texas Senate takes up the Paxton impeachment. And one of the offenses involves an acknowledged extramarital affair.
Right.
So the 31 this is my dream, scenario. 31 senators in that Senate. It's 20-10 for conviction. And the final vote is Angela Paxton, the wife. She shouldn't vote, but she probably will. The vote of the impeached attorney general. And I'll tell you something. If she votes to acquit it, just imagine what she could squeeze out of that son of a bitch.
It's just unbelievable. Yeah, the allegation is not simply an affair, because that's not impeachable, as we well know, but that Paxton benefited a real estate developer who was helping out the woman with whom Paxton was alleged to have had an affair. So, look, should Senator Paxton, the spouse of the Attorney General, recuse herself? It's kind of one of the oldest provisions of the law is you shouldn't be a judge in your own case. This is very close to her own case. There's another member of the Senate named in the impeachment, though. They allege that this senator filed a straw request for an opinion. Like a lot of states, Attorney General's opinion has force of law in Texas. It's an advisory opinion, but it has force of law. And the allegation is this state senator, not his wife, was set up to ask a very specific question to the Attorney General so he could issue a ruling favorable to this real estate investor who Paxton is alleged to have helped. It's just a total mess, though. It's a total mess. But it is really striking that the House, so Republican, voted so overwhelmingly to indict him. So now to impeach him. Now it'll go to trial. So I'm going to
turn it over to James, but let me ask you finally, will he be convicted?
I don't know, is the honest answer. It takes 21 out of 31 senators. And it's an overwhelmingly Republican state Senate. The trial is likely to be at the end of the summer, which will give Paxton plenty of time to mount a defense, which is his right. Very belatedly, Donald Trump weighed in. Trump, obviously very popular among Texas Republicans. He weighed in and said, I'm going to come after anybody who votes to impeach him. And 121 did anyway. So it's interesting that Paxton's efforts to enlist Mr. Trump have failed.
James.
So, Paul, you said something up on striking, that in Texas, the Attorney General's opinion has the force of law. That is uncommon, I think. I know in the U.S. it does not, and I know in Louisiana it doesn't. But is that a kind of unique provision of Texas law?
The truth is, I don't know. I have a Texas law degree, so I just thought it was commonplace.
Yeah, right.
But, the U.S. Constitution is very clear. The Supreme Court cannot issue advisory opinions, and I think that's wise because it would clog up the courts. Right. But in Texas, you can ask if you had a state agency, if you're a member of the legislature. That's not you and I can't do it. But important players in Texas government can go to the Attorney General and say, if I do this, is this legal? Right. And that has huge force of law behind it. And it's I don't know. I thought it was very common in a lot of states. It's been actually a pretty useful thing for state agencies.
I think in Louisiana, you can get the advisory opinion, but it doesn't mean it. You can use it to protect it, but a judge could overthrow it. It would just say, no, that's wrong. It doesn't have any force law. But anyway, we're in the weeds here now.
But again, the allegation is he abused that power to help a wealthy donor.
So in the Senate race 2018, I think we came within under three points of winning.
Oh, by the way, can I rewind one thing, though?
Sure.
Not this most recent reelection, but Paxton's reelection before that. He won against a friend of mine. My son Billy was working for him, Justin Nelson. Nelson, don't cry for him. He lost the race for Attorney General. He wound up as lead counsel for Dominion v. Fox, winning one of the biggest lawsuits and most important lawsuits in modern American history. So I think Justin Nelson actually came out a bigger winner, even though he came in second in the election.
Yeah, I think I'll campaign for him. I went to some beer party in Austin.
I actually interviewed him for a column I wrote about Texas that year. He's a former
brilliant guy,
lawyer.
Too. Absolutely. Yeah. A brilliant guy, and just carved up Fox and to the delight of many of us.
So in the election of 2018, Beto O'Rourke burst on the scene, came within, 2.5 points or 3 points of beating Cruz. So here we come 6 years later. Cruz is definitely less popular now than before. The demographic did not stop shifting in Texas, although it was a horrifically disappointing 2020 election in Texas. And, talk about the Democratic primary and what it would take because that's one of our best, believe it or not, that's as good a chance as we got for a pickup in the year 2024. So talk a little bit about what you see in the Texas Senate race and how could this unfold on favorable terms?
The dream candidate for Democrats is Colin Allred. He's a congressman from North Dallas. He's George W. Bush's congressman or he was last time I looked at the district. A terrific guy.
They have a pretty good relationship, too, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Colin knocked on his door and said, Mr. President, I'm here to serve you in any way. I mean, Colin has been a model, I think, a congressman, right? Grassroots oriented, really, it now become very popular in what used to be a very Republican district. He's got a perfect profile to run statewide. Raised by a heroic single mom who I believe was a teacher, joined the boys club and got into athletics, winds up going to Baylor on a scholarship, plays football for Baylor. Then he makes it, he's undersized, but he's all Southwest Conference. He makes it in the NFL, plays for 2 NFL teams. And then after that goes to law school, becomes a civil rights lawyer. He's a really remarkably successful guy. He's I think just got the right profile. I talked to him last week and he said that, look, here's my message. How I got here, and I think one of the values I would bring to the Senate would be faith, family, and football. That's pretty good in Texas and anywhere. He will probably likely have a primary opponent, which I think is unwise. Rolando Gutierrez, who's a good guy. He's the state senator from Uvalde and other parts of that part of Texas. But so he was clearly heartbroken by the massacre in his hometown. And has pushed hard for gun safety laws and is clearly talking about making a Senate challenge in the primary. What frustrates me is when you have a state where your party hasn't won a single statewide election in 28 years, it's not a good time to divide the party. Cruz will likely have no primary opponent. There was a poll out last week from University of Texas, Tyler, and it showed Cruz is favorable of 42. Greg Abbott's at 49. But Cruz is favorable of 42. He's a negative of 50. This is a beatable guy. And in fact, in the trial heat, Colin is not well known yet in Texas. And yet he's only trailing by 5. Beto, of course, got to be very, very well known and only lost by 2.75. So Colin starts out this race only 5 points down against a guy that there's not much more, I think, that people are going to hear about Ted Cruz. He says, boy, I really do like that fellow. There's a lot they're going to learn about Colin Allred that they're going to love.
You're feeling decent about our shot here.
We couldn't get, this is the thing though. We couldn't get a better candidate than Colin Allred, if you ask me. Of course, I felt that way about Sherry Beasley in North Carolina. I felt that way about Val Demings in Florida. I felt that way about Tim Ryan in Ohio. Democrats have really, really good candidates. And in some of those places, I think, frankly, the party let them down. And I think Justice Beasley is one of them. I think Tim Ryan's another, Val Demings. So I really want to see the National Party step up for Colin Allred. I know Texas is not a swing state in a presidential election, but it really could be. I mean, Ted Cruz, Al Franken famously said, I like Ted Cruz better than any of my colleagues in the Senate do, and I hate Ted Cruz.
And you remember then that Supreme Court vacancy, and Barack Obama said I could appoint Cruz and there'd be 8 more vacancies.
So Ted, this may be running out on him. And I seriously, if I were advising Ted Cruz, I'd say you got to really watch. The usual anti-woke baloney is not going to work against Colin Allred. Okay, he is the real deal. Faith, family, and football is something that Ted Cruz is going to have a hard time attacking.
The Cancun comment.
And we call it the 5 F's: faith, family, football, food, and fixing flats. There's another one, but I'm not going to say it. Even I'm not going to say it.
Please don't.
Fashionable.
But I can't say enough. And I saw him at the beginning. But actually, when he was first recruited to run for the House, Nancy Pelosi asked me to go down there, meet with his staff, and campaign with them a little bit. My son Patrick and I went down there. Absolutely fell in love with him. So I have huge personal investment. My niece Grace worked for him. Grace Begala, most beautiful little SMU sorority girl, now graduate, who also this last season shot a deer in South Texas with my brother and me.
Oh, so I'm sorry to hear that, Paul.
She's all
I'm
Texan,
so sorry
man.
to hear that.
And she loves Colin. She worked for him, said he was a great boss. And he's really a beloved congressman there. So I think, the Democrats' best shot.
Yeah, he's been a guest on the show. Is a good friend of mine. And Al and I are both highly, highly, highly impressed with Colin Allred and wishing him the best. So there's one of your favorite sporting events is coming up. And, Texas and LSU have kind of been go quite a bit to the College World Series. Wake Forest is currently Al's team, but currently number one in the country and is the betting favorite to win it. What should Al look forward to as his team begins this sort of journey to try to get to Omaha?
It's the most James, let me just say to Paul, Carville and I have a wonderful relationship on this program. We occasionally disagree, and it doesn't much matter. However, when the two favored teams get to Omaha, LSU and Texas, there's going to be more tension than you can imagine. We may need a UT guy to mediate.
Let me tell you, don't assume I'm not assuming we get there, and it ain't easy to get there. Let me tell you, man. Once you get there, it gets harder. But what do you like about it?
I love Wake. They're not a perennial powerhouse like Texas or LSU, but they have been there and they have won it all. This is in the 50s, but they have a ring.
That was before you were born, Paul Begala.
But here's the deal: Wake Forest might have the best story in college baseball, the best coach, the most compelling. Just Al, you want to tell everybody about Coach Walter and what he did about 10 years ago? 10 or 12 years ago, he had a player named Kevin Jordan, a baseball player. Kevin got sick as a dog, couldn't find out what was wrong. Finally, it turned out he needed a kidney transplant. Kevin's family didn't match up to give a kidney to him. Right. So Coach Walter takes the test, qualifies, and gives his player his kidney.
Oh, man,
this is astonishing. This is like by the way, I will say Coach Walter is a Georgetown guy. He is trained by the Jesuits and a man for others. I'm such a fan of him. And they asked him, said, well, your player is black and you're white. How do you know it'll match? He said, we have the same blood. We all do. Isn't that beautiful?
James,
he's just an amazing guy.
If LSU plays against him, you're going to cheer against this guy?
He's amazing.
If LSU played against, St. Francis of Assisi, I'd want St. Francis of Assisi to catch the clap and die.
No, but Paul, you're right. It's an amazing story, and you're right. They did win once, but they won. It was 67 years ago, 68 years ago, and they have not been a very good baseball team for a long time, but he's put this together. And I'll tell you one thing: he's got a fabulous pitching staff. And
this Rhett Lauder, the big right-hander they have,
I think
he may be the only
pitcher
better than Paul Skeens. He might be better than Skeens. He might be better than Paul Skeens. He's really, really good. His ERA is way below 2. It's like 1.6 or something. Lauder's. The problem, Al, and this is my worry about Texas, who's not even hosting a regional, is Omaha, and I'm going no matter what. I go almost every year. The Begala boys come. We just it's a family. It's always Father's Day weekend, the first weekend of College World Series. So we always go. It's all about pitching depth, not height.
Yep.
And there's not a better pitcher than Lauder and Skeens at James' school and yours. But it's about how deep your bullpen goes. You got to play a lot of games, man. Regional, which is double elimination. Super regional, double elimination. Omaha, which is double elimination till you get to the final 2, and then it's 2 out of 3. So, it's a long, long haul. It takes a lot of arms.
Well, we got a good number 2 and number 3 starter. We got 1 or 2 good bullpen relievers, but you may need more than that.
You said, look, it skipped in the 90s. We had Ben McDonald. Remember, we went to the Orioles, but man, they pitched him. Whew, God! And I think the Skeens, and you're not going to be able to pitch these kids, these really good pitchers. That their agents or the coach, or they'll say, "Coach, I'm not throwing more than 80 pitches today," and I don't blame them. It's not like
McDonald. I think McDonald. I should have looked it up, James. I think McDonald won 3 games in one College World Series.
He might have.
He was a secretariat. He was just unstoppable.
He is generally the commentator on ESPN, and he is very good.
He is.
He's a very good. He's a very good colleague. One thing that we do is, we have Marcus Spears and Booger McFarland on ESPN. Yeah. They're very good analysts. They're very colorful, and of course, Shaq is a big. What kind
Booger
of commentator
fills the screen too, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Booger's a large human being.
I don't think any college sports team has more prominent commentators than we do, but
Duke does. Every time you turn around, there's another Dookie on.
Jay Billis. There's nobody better than Jay Billis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seriously. I don't know.
I know you don't like Duke, but Jay Billis.
I'm fine. I just think Spears and Booger and Shaq, but I'm not going to argue that. They have a lot of people there.
I'm arguing for my wife, Paul.
I understand. It's not a discussion. So, but I mean, I think the only bad news I'd say, Al, is I think in this century, the number one seed is won one time. I don't know if it means anything, but
well, I was counting on this being a year in which records were broken. No team had ever been 0-3 behind in the NBA and going on to win. And then the other night, guess what? No team has ever been 0-3 behind and going on to win. So
Wake opens up against George Mason, okay, which is like the easiest win with the exception of LSU taking on Tulane, James, which has all of 19 wins this year. They got like 42 losses, and they somehow stumbled into it. Well, so you guys both have passes on Friday.
Paul, I would remind you that maybe once or twice this year, Oakland's going to beat the Dodgers, or Kansas City, or the Rockies are going to beat somebody good. So I think baseball. I think if you have a basketball or football game where you have a George Mason against a Wake Forest or Tulane against LSU, it's gone. It's unwinnable. Baseball, you're a heavy underdog, but you got a shot.
Just remember, Tulane beat Southern Cal in the Cotton Bowl, where they had about a 0.05% chance to win the game. And by the way, and they're hot coming into the tournament. We're cold. Mm-hmm. We're 7-7 our last 14 games.
Yeah. Right? Over the course of the season, LSU's the best team.
Can anybody say Coastal Carolina, who won it all like in 2015?
Yeah.
This is a weird event, man. This is not the Blue Bloods.
Ole Miss won it all last year, and they're not even back. That's how hard it is to get to Omaha.
They were not that good in the regular season. Right. All I'm saying now, the Blue Bloods do okay, but it's not like anybody can win this thing. It's the most wide open,
the most fun thing, though. It's always in Omaha. Used to be at Johnny Rosenblatt Stadium. Now they have this nice, beautiful new TD Ameritrade. But it's just such a great event, and you can walk from the stadium across the river into Council Bluffs, Iowa. Why would you do that? Because you're crossing the Bob Carey Footbridge, named for the War Hero Medal of Honor recipient from Nebraska, who was governor and senator there. It's just a great town. Omaha is one of my favorites. It really is.
Well, watching college baseball, which I rarely do, was really, my friend Curtis Wilkie down in Mississippi says, I never missed a home game. And I remember this, but 25 years ago, Tim Duncan could have been the number one draft choice for 3 years in a row and decided to stay in college. And someone said, why'd you do it? He said, because I like what I'm doing. He said, I get to go to a baseball game every week after the season. And that's, man, I wish I lived on a campus during baseball season, during basketball season too. But
it is the most fun. When I was a student, believe me, I missed more classes than I did baseball games. Of course, we had this old pitcher named Roger Clemens when I was in college. We had Calvin Schiraldi. We had Spike Owen. We had just like won the College World Series my senior year. It's just great. So that's when I got the bug, and I just love it. And by the way, when LSU, back at the old Johnny Rosenblatt, James, I went and the LSU fans started a fire in the parking lot, put a big Dutch oven on there, were making gumbo, and I hung out with the LSU fans because, who else? Texans don't start a fire in a parking lot and start cooking gumbo.
Well, let me tell you, we do interviews with the bartenders in Omaha. Uh-huh. One time LSU and UL went, shit, they broke every record they could imagine. I promise you, the bartenders in Omaha are pulling for LSU harder than I am. All right? But when Wake Forest, I got news for you, Albert. They ain't gonna outdrink us. They might outplay us.
I'm not even sure any longer we can outpray you. But in any event, Paul Begala, you have been a fabulous guest. There's no one we enjoy having on this show more than you. I'm still waiting for when the Lone Star State starts to change politically.
It's coming. Colin Allred, it's coming. You watch my man Colin.
That, as James said, that is the big one. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, James.
Now, the third in our new series called Screw the Voter. This is a good one, James. One of the reasons that practically every study shows that we have honest and reasonably efficient elections in America is the hundreds of thousands of dedicated election workers who work and supervise the polls. But this is just a really disturbing study that, according to the nonpartisan Brennan Center and a survey of more than 10,000 of these poll workers, the Trump thugs and election deniers are threatening them as they peddle their lies about voting fraud. Almost a third of election workers in this survey, was surveyed 10,000, James, so it's good size. Almost a third say they've been harassed or abused. 45% say they're concerned about their safety or that of their colleagues. 22% say they know at least one election official who, because of these threats, has quit for any future elections. This is a big deal. Polling places will be understaffed in 2024, and that's a threat to democracy. More federal resources and protections are urgently needed. And I also would urge everyone out there, James, to read a recent Washington Post piece by Yvonne Wingate Sanchez, a terrific reporter who was a guest on our program. She profiled the former Republican chair of the Maricopa County, Arizona Elections Board named Bill Gates. And after he refused to buckle under false charges of election fraud, he was vilified, abused, labeled a traitor who should be shot and hung by the election deniers. He and his family were threatened at their home. Their children were terrified after threats, and they even had to temporarily move. Gates went into therapy, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. To repeat, James, there are more than a few violent-prone election deniers egged on by Trump. And I'll tell you, I really think this is a real threat to the American ideal of free and fair elections.
Well, it's impossible to disagree with you. It's impossible to say the depths of how terrible and awful this is. I mean, if there's, I don't know, if the last line of defense we have in democracy are elections, and the number of people that work on election day is just staggering. And the whole system depends on, Miss Mabel showing up at the precinct to record the votes. I mean, and to be attacking these people, Congress should pass a enhanced penalty for harassing or interfering with an election worker. It should be a mandatory 7-year sentence without parole. I mean, you got to come in, and you can't fool around with these people. They are dangerous to the United States. They're massively unpatriotic. And, we have enhanced penalties for hate crimes. We have enhanced penalties for everything else. And they have to put a special justice, pass a law and put a special Justice Department strike force and then lock some of these goddamn people up. You think the Trump contingent would allow that, James? I think they like this. Well, there's more than just a Trump contingent in Congress. And by the way, if they don't pass it, run on it. Right. I don't think the average swing voter or independent voter much likes beating up election officials. I agree. Sometimes if you can't get it right now, introduce it and run on it. There's two women in Georgia, the January 6th commission. I apologize, I can't remember her name, but it was she was a young black woman and her mother. It just ruined their lives for doing nothing. They had to move. And put 7 years, no parole, no nothing. No probation, serve every day of 7 years. And then you'll stop this shit. You'll stop it. Make it a federal crime. Hire 200 assistant U.S. attorneys, a whole batch of FBI agents, and put an end to this crap, and right now. Yep. Oh, I wish it could happen, but you're right. If it can't happen, you ought to make an issue of it. Right. You really introduce the bill. Right. Make them vote. Make them vote. Yep, I agree. Now, James, for the outrage of the week. Remember Tara Reid? During the 2020 campaign, she accused Joe Biden, when he was a senator, of sexually molesting her in the hallways of the Russell Senate office building.
It was demonstrably bogus, as PBS's Lisa Desjardins showed in a camera walk around those hallways where there's no place to hide. So any sexual assault would have had to have taken place in full view of staffers, senators, and tourists who walked those halls. It was clearly a totally phony story from the beginning. But this year, House Republicans Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, two of the P's in that lunatic pod, vowed to bring Reid before their committee to vent those charges. Well, they're going to have to boost their travel budget, James, because Tara Reid this week defected to Russia, greeted by a Russian agent and Putin crony. And now maybe Greene and Gaetz, the two junior varsity Inspector Clouseaus, they may want to investigate the role Russia might have played in those fabricated charges 3 years ago. I don't think so, James.
So this is like, and I got to say this, you were very skeptical of this from the get-go. You did reporting on it. I suspect you probably had something to do in dropping a suggestion on the PBS thing that showed that it was impossible. But if we don't have, and some people in the press did very well in this, were sort of skeptical. Others, not so.
Right.
And if we don't have an accounting, if somebody, a Jim Fowler's type or some graybeard doesn't come in and dissect this and see what went right, what went wrong, we're just going to repeat the same thing again. And a problem that we have in the country, I very much believe in a free press and everything, but the reason that trust in a lot of the corporate media lanes, whatever they call it, I have no fucking idea, is they don't hold themselves accountable sufficiently enough. And, I remember people saying, you always believe the woman. No, you always believe the evidence. I mean, there's no... I think it's some level sexist to say that a woman can't lie. Of course they can lie, they're like any other human being. Now, generally, when they make these charges, I will say that they tend to be more right than wrong. But this was obviously every freaking red flag in the world went up on this. Everyone. And, some people ran with this and treated it like it was like a real deal. And, of course, this woman is pathetic and, has got any number of problems, and she's in Russia now. And, of course, does anyone really think she wasn't being paid by the Russians to do this? I don't have proof of it, but, boy, I'll tell you what, if I was investigating this, that'd be the first place I'd look. But hopefully people live and learn, and somebody will do an after-action report and say, some people got this very right, and some people got it very wrong, and we got to name names here.
Yeah,
all right?
absolutely.
You just got to. You just can't. You go through these things, and everybody goes, "Oh my God!" The emails come to mind, and then it wasn't anything. We'll just move on to the next thing. Well, then people don't believe you. You like to. What's the little boy that cried wolf? And that's a timeless piece of literature, observation, and you got to be careful. And when you cry wolf and there's no wolf, you got to be pointed out and exposed.
You're absolutely right, James. And I tell you why I knew this story was phony in the beginning. I covered the Congress for 10 years for the Wall Street Journal. Right. And over in the House, they have the speaker's lobby, and all the members congregate there. And it's a marvelous place for a reporter. You can get to see almost everybody. There's nothing quite like that in the Senate. So I used to walk the hallways of Russell and Dirksen and Hart, because you'd run into staffers, you'd run into senators. It was really a great way to report. And when you walk those hallways, you realize that there weren't hiding places there. There wasn't a place to say, come on here and do something private. And she charged that he did this in the hallways, which I knew was impossible. And reporters who were reporting on that story should have done what Lisa Desjardins did. They should have walked those hallways, and they would have known the story was a hoax.
Yeah, I'll very happily and proudly give you credit. You were skeptical of this from the start, and you covered it. You'd been there, and of course they interviewed 70 different women that worked for Biden. It's never happened like this before. Right. It just everything in the world. It's like the Ohio State wrestling locker room. Okay, oh, Jim Jordan didn't know him, please. So my outrageous, and I don't know why I still care, but I do, is an incident happened, and I got this off of Microsoft News, which I assume is not going to make itself liable because it's a big country. And there's some nuns, some Carmelite nuns, and they wear sandals, not shoes. The nuns sued Bishop Michael Olson in the Fort Worth Diocese of $1 million, alleging Olson invaded their property when he showed up in their monastery in April, interrogated them for hours, confiscated their phones and computers, spied on their texts, and made copies of content on these devices. Olson in the Fort Worth Diocese issued a statement May 16, publicly accusing Reverend Mother Superior Teresa Agnes Gerlach of having violated her vows of chastity with the priest. In announcing the ecclesiastical investigation, in Catholicism, both nuns and priests break vows. The diocese did not name the priest alleged in this. Okay, so the story further states that that they're not entitled to have mass said there. And I did ruin these women's lives. The woman was on feeding tubes, and I have no idea. But I was Catholic educated. I'm hardly Gary Wills, but there is nothing that I know in Catholic doctrine or Catholic theology that says, assume that these women were sinners. And I don't know. I'm not willing to assume that. Those are the people that really need the Mass. The Pope should go from Rome to Fort Worth and say Mass for these people. He said that, the church is a field hospital for the spiritually wounded. It's unbelievable. So, and I'm going to shock everybody. It so happens that these nuns own 72 acres in Arlington, Texas, right on the Trinity River. It has a reported estimated land value of $20 million. Now, you don't think the good bishop is trying to confiscate the Carmelite nuns' property? That would never cross your mind, now would it? Of course it would. Of course it would. When they put $57 million in the cemetery fund in Milwaukee to not pay judgments of these young altar boys that have been raped to do anything. But I don't know why I still care, but unfreaking believable. Going in there and confiscating people's cell phones and text and ruining lives. And I suspect very strongly, like most things in Holy Mother of the Church, money is at the bottom of it.
Well, James, thank goodness you do still care, because that is just an absolute outrage. I haven't followed the Texas bishops as closely as you have it, but this guy in Fort Worth sounds like he sounds like a clone of Bernard Law and some of those other.
But I don't understand how these people get through. I mean, supposedly, he went to Catholic University. I looked up. He was kind of trained. I don't understand the idea that because you're sinning, we're not going to say Mass for you. That's all the more reason you're supposed to, according to the doctrine is issued by Holy Father Pope Francis. It's unfreaking believable. And, again, 72 acres right in the middle of the DFW Metroplex, right on the Trinity River. It sure is an inviting target. And the history of the church is they'll do anything for money. If you don't believe me, see the Vatican Bank.
Boy, you're absolutely right.
Right.
Okay, now for our listener questions. We'll start with Shane in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who notes that last week while answering a question from Andrew in Australia about Democrats needing to consider Southern governors, Shane says that James pushed back a little and suggested he thinks maybe someone significant is going to jump into the nomination. That's not contradictory. Of the people you see in the Democratic bench, who is somebody significant that might jump in?
Oh, God. Roy Cooper, J.B. Pritzker, Mitch Landrieu, Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, Josh Shapiro, Raphael Warnock, Jay Inslee, Jared Polis, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Gavin Newsom. I don't know. I mean, there's so much staggering talent lined up that. I don't know if any of them will. But, president's numbers don't improve by Labor Day. People are going to start getting very itchy here.
Right.
I'm very itchy. And hopefully this deal in the summer, won't necessitate that. But there's real underlying nervousness here. And the thing that people are nervous about, I'll be very blunt, is the Senate. The Senate map is awful, people. In order to keep the Senate, which is the Supreme Court, by the way, we're going to have to hold places like West Virginia, Ohio, Montana, tough. And win in places like Indiana, Texas, and Florida. Don't kid yourself. We need to have a monster year at the presidential level to hold on to the Senate.
James, the only candidate you mentioned that I would take out of that would be Raphael Warnock, not because he's not a great candidate, but you cannot afford to lose a senator. Right. I think there are a bunch of really good governors out there.
But the idea that we don't have was completely reliant on Biden, and there's nothing underneath. And you and I say this, and again, hats off to Jackie Combs for pointing it out, is the greatest freaking myth in American politics. And the number of informed or so-called smart people that say that is stunning to me every day.
Because they're so wrong.
Yes.
Quaid in Richmond, Virginia says, given Russia's spot as the junior partner in the Russia-China relations, is Putin left to just accept a loss? No matter what happens next, China seems to be a real winner here. I think it's a little more complicated than that, Quaid. I think, there's a number of people, a guy named Hal Brands, a very distinguished historian, has written a book that, we may be overrating China. I think China is playing its cards very carefully here. They like the idea that America resources are going into a war, but they don't want it to go too far. They basically have contempt for Putin and Russia. That's a marriage of convenience. They're in the driver's seat as far as being able to talk to both sides right now. The only one of those big three that can. But let's not overestimate China's strength.
I agree with you a lot on this. And a couple of things. Number one, we always focus on our problems, and we have so much debt and everything. China has terrible debt problems, and it manifests itself, as I understand it, through heavy borrowing by local governments. And some of them are starting to go under. And, I was watching the 60 Minutes thing deployed to U.S. Pacific Fleet. China has one aircraft carrier. I mean, yes, the PLA is a huge number of people, but they would not do that well right now in a war with the United States Navy. I got news for you. And they kind of know that. And I think it's in a lot of people's perceived interest to exaggerate China's strength. Don't get me wrong. They're a very strong country economically, as our friend Ambassador Wisner points out. They have a seasoned diplomatic corps. They're able to field things all around the world. They're certainly a adversary, competitor, or somewhere in between. It's going to take a lot of depth and skillful foreign policy to get this through this. But I'm where Jamie Dimon is. No one ever went broke betting on the United States. And you're right, and Russia's exposed itself to be anything but a freaking superpower. And, everybody's waiting for this Ukrainian offense, which seems to me is kind of inevitable. But it's a very, very, very good question.
Well, James, these listeners are going to hold you accountable because Liz in Portland, Oregon,
China guy, but
Liz says a few episodes ago, James said no labels was evil. Can he explain why he feels that way? The run-up recently had them on for an interview. I don't know what the run-up is. Is that something I miss? But anyway, whatever it is, they had him on for an interview, and Liz thinks it was seriously intriguing, and she says possibly a legitimate way to get us out of the looming 2024 mess. Educate me, please, James. She does say, I love the show.
Well, how are they going to get you out of the mess? All right? And you take Wisconsin, all right? Hillary lost by less than Jill Stein got votes. All right? The third party in Wisconsin this time could have easily cost Biden. He only won by 20,000 votes. So what I don't understand is what is it that they hope to accomplish? So they're going to say, well, we don't like Trump, but we don't like AOC, so we're going to run somebody and we're going to raise, I don't know, $500 million or some astronomical sum, of which most of that money would go to Democrats anyway, and we're going to get it on the ballot in key states. They're not going to give even enough ballots in states that are going to be able to probably get 270 electoral votes. And Al Gore, well, Ralph Nader cost him the election for it. I'm sorry. It's just a blanket assertion that happens to be correct. Jill Stein got more votes than Hillary lost by in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. How many goddamn times do we see this movie and we somehow or another think it's going to end a different way? It's not. The only thing that they can do is cost Democrats votes. And it's very evident. If you want to, I understand people like more centrists about, but I'll give you money the third way. They're a very good group. All right. They're not, they understand. They got different sort of ideas, but they're not going to go in there. And the only thing that can come out of no labels is it helps Donald Trump get reelected to the presidency. And that's the very definition of evil.
Amen. Jeff in Marin County, California says, what can the Democrats do for faith outreach? We need to connect with people who can connect with pastors and priests and campaign and after electoral wins. We need people who can speak the language of shared faith. We need people in the party who understand that world. Jeff, you're right. The Democratic Party, most Democratic candidates, not all, most, are crazy to cede the faith vote. They're not going to win it in most places. They're not going to win evangelicals, for instance, but they can cut into it because they have a better story. There are a number of evangelicals who, while very conservative on issues like abortion, are actually very progressive on issues like climate change. And I think the language is important here. And the delicate balancing act for Democrats is there is no better issue, as we saw in 2022, for Democrats than the issue of a woman's right to choose in most cases. And they have to be very delicate on that. But I think that I think language could help. And maybe there's, instead of getting 22% of the evangelical vote in some place, they get 25% or 28%. I think a lot of that has to do with style.
Well, it is the foremost Catholic theologian of my lifetime, I believe, is Gary Wills, a keen observer, who famously said the social gospel, which is the gospel, All right, that's it. That's what it's all about. If someone asks for your shirt, you're supposed to give them your coat. It's pretty simple. And I think they can, on vast majority of issues, the teachings of the Gospels dovetail with the priorities of the Democratic Party. And you can certainly, when you talk about that, you can talk about how, as Colin Allred is early in the show, what Paul talked about, how he's informed by his faith. And so there's certainly more touchstones for Democrats than they are for these right-wing goofy people. But yeah, and you can talk about it in that way, and it's very, faith teaches you to be tolerant of your fellow person, to have a particular affection to help the unfortunate. I mean, that's all part of the teaching, man. That's not part of the teaching. That actually is the teaching.
Right.
I mean, right. The other stuff is just all commentary.
James Sharman in La Jolla, California. This is a good question. When investigating or prosecuting the events of January 6th, have journalists, representatives, lawyers, etc., ever asked the question, what do you think the mob would have done if they had physically gotten their hands on Nancy Pelosi, Mike Pence, AOC, or Ilhan Omar? I know it's hypothetical, but I think it's deserving of a conversation from Trump and anyone who's been questioned about it that day.
Well, probably La Jolla, I know well. Los Angeles County is one of the nicest places I've ever been in the United States. It's gotten... Back when I was in the late 60s and out in the Marine Corps, it's unbelievably crowded now, but that is a gorgeous, gorgeous part of the world. They would have hung Mike Pence, right? And they would have beaten Nancy Pelosi and drug her down the stairs, it would have been even by AOC or Ilhan Omar, no telling what they'd have done. They had every intention of doing that. You remember that they were trying to get to Mike Pence and would chase him, and that police officers, a black guy, bravely distracted him.
Right.
They were coming after him. And I can't imagine how much Mike Pence and mother hate Donald Trump. I mean, he didn't give a shit. He didn't care. And they would have hung him. I don't have any doubt. I mean, they were, hang Mike Pence.
If you had any doubts about how scary it was, just look at the picture of Josh Hawley, who, after egging the crowd on, was running like a scared jackrabbit down the hall to try to escape.
Was he? If you could read one book, I read this book when I was a young man, and I got signed to it in college, and it became very enthralled by it. It's called the Oxbow Incident by a guy named Walter Van Tilburg Clark, I think. Incident. Yeah. And it's all about the mob. How, and if I don't know, God knows how many years since I read it, but I was really taken by the fact about how when people become part of a mob, that they lose all grounding. And that was a mob 100%. And they would have done it.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right.
They would have frickin' done it. It's a good question.
Douglas in Chicago says, from articles I've read recently, it seems like the Trump 2024 campaign has more experienced political experts in his inner circle. There are fewer Lewandowskis, Pascalis. Is this something Democrats should be concerned about? Douglas, first of all, I'm not that impressed with the people that I've read about or know about that are hanging around there. But it all comes down to Donald Trump. If you think Donald Trump listens to anyone, you're wrong. He doesn't. I mean, he won in 2020, or 16 rather. Admittedly, the Russians helped him. But Kellyanne Conway was the campaign manager. I don't think the Trump campaign will be anything different than what it was in the past. What you see is what you get. It's going to be spewing evil, and I don't think it matters a whole lot who the campaign manager is. James?
I concur 100%. And he's going to do what he wants to do,
right?
And it's going to, what he does is going to be better. Which is really kind of funny. He hasn't weighed in on this default deal.
He has not,
which is kind of strange. The other thing is,
DeSantis is baiting him too.
And he's got a lot of he's got financial problems, and he probably figured out that a default would really screw him up. All right, because he's some way, whatever he does, it's not an altruistic motive; it's a selfish motive. Yeah. And you say, why has he been quiet on this? And the answer is, I suspect because he thought it would hurt him financially, which he's going to need to not be hurt financially, because if he doesn't start paying these lawyers, they're going to work for him.
Right.
But nothing he ever does has any patriotic or altruistic motive. It's always about him. And so why has he been quiet on this? Good question.
Yeah, and the Trump MO is, once it's clear it's going to pass, then to blast it, because that's what he does. The final question is from New York City. We're not discriminating against the big urban areas. This is from Brian, who said, James, you're going to love this question, as I do too. Why is taxing millionaires and billionaires unfavorable? I read 9% of U.S. adults are millionaires, so requiring them to pay just $5,000 more per year yields $100 million in extra revenue. Shouldn't that be easy?
So, maybe the most popular thing in Poland, or certainly the top 5, are taxing millionaires or billionaires. There's no, politically, it's enormously popular. And what they do is they have convinced people that it's political party. If you look at this debt deal, they could have fixed this thing like you would not believe by increasing tax. That you can't increase any taxes on anything. And boy, is that not only is not a political downside, there's every political upside to doing this. And I mean, that's a 74% issue every time you poll it. But boy, they get in, and the problem is they hire, and I'm just going to say it right now, every time they come in, they hire all these Democratic lobbyists, the Financial Services Roundtable, all these people, and it's the Democratic lobbyists that kill it. If the next president, Democratic president, I don't care if it's, Biden probably won't do it, is any Democratic firm that works to undermine a tax raise on the wealthy will be persona non grata in the White House or anywhere else, and name their goddamn names.
Well,
name their names.
I couldn't agree with you more, but my profession bears a big responsibility for that. We ought to be out there every time there's a bill up there, and we have not done that. We'll do a story on some, hotshot lobbyist, but I want to know, there were people on the carried interest. There were people who had worked for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who were now lobbyists who were trying to help carried interest.
It's the most inexcusable freaking thing in the world that you tax a hedge fund substantially less than a corporal in the fucking Marine Corps, which is outrageous.
Right.
Outrageous.
And you know what the Republicans will say, James? They'll say this is not the time to increase taxes. So I just want to ask them, when is the time to increase taxes?
When is the time?
Okay.
If it's good times, you can't. I mean, it's all the same. Bought for, paid for. But these people know how greedy Washington is, and they exploit it to the nth degree.
Brian, good question. I'm glad you asked it. For any of you whose questions we didn't get to this week, send them in again. We'll get to them next week. There are more really great questions that we can possibly get to. So thank you. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Now, following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to the sponsors in our recent show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another program as we continue our War Room planning.